I was sat this weekend with my partner's little brother who's 18 years old.
Yes.
And as we ate breakfast yesterday before they flew back to Portugal, we had this discussion with her family. Her dad was there, her mum was there, Raf, the younger brother, was there, and my girlfriend was there. Difficult because most of them don't speak English, so we had to use, funnily enough, AI to translate what
Of
I was
course.
saying. But the big discussion at breakfast was, what should Raf do in the
Yeah.
future? He's 18 years old. He's got his career ahead of him, and the decisions he makes, as is so evident in your story, at this exact moment as to what information and intelligence he acquires for himself will quite clearly define the rest of his life. If you were sat at that table with me yesterday when I was trying to give Raf advice on what knowledge he should acquire at 18 years old, what would you have said? And what are the principles that sit behind that?
The most important thing is to develop analytical, critical thinking skills. To some level, I don't care how you get there. So if you like math or science, or if you like the law, or if you like entertainment, just think critically. In his particular case, as an 18-year-old, what I would encourage him to do is figure out how to write programs in a language called Python. Python is easy to use, it's very easy to understand, and it's become the language of AI. So the AI systems, when they write code for themselves, they write code in Python. And so you can't lose as developing Python programming skills. And the simplest thing to do with an 18-year-old man is say, make a game. Because these are typically gamers, stereotypically. Make a game that's interesting using Python.
It's interesting because I wondered if coding, I think 5, 10 years ago, everyone's advice to an 18-year-old is learn how to code. But in a world of AI where these large language models are able to write code and are, increasing every month in their ability to write better and better code, I wondered if that's like a dying art form.
Yeah, a lot of people oppose this, and that's not correct. It sure looks like these systems will write code, but remember, the systems also have interfaces called APIs, which you can program them. So one of the large revenue sources for these AI models, because these companies have to make money at some point, right, is you build a program and you actually make an API call and ask it a question. Typical example is give it a picture and tell me what's in the picture. Now, can you have some fun with that as an 18-year-old? Of course, right? So when I say Python, I mean Python using the tools that are available to build something new, something that you're interested in.
And when you say critical thinking, what is critical thinking and how does
Uh,
one go about acquiring that as a skill?
well, the first and most important thing about critical thinking is to distinguish between being marketed to, which is also known as being lied to, and being given the argument on your own. We have, because of social media, which I hold responsible for a lot of ills as well as good things in life, we've sort of gotten used to people just telling us something and believing it because our friends believe it or so forth. And I strongly encourage people to check assertions. So you get people to say all this stuff, and I learned at Google all those years. Somebody says something, I check it on Google. Do I? And you then have a question. Do you criticize them and correct them, or do you let it go? But you want to be in the position where somebody makes a statement. Like, did you know that only 10% of Americans have passports, which is a widely viewed but false statement? It's actually higher than that, although it's never high enough, in my view, in America. But that's an example of an assertion that you can just say, is that true? Right? There's a long meme of American politicians where the Congress is basically full of criminals. It may be full of one or two, but it's not full of 90. But again, people believe this stuff because it sounds plausible. So if somebody says something plausible, just check it. You have a responsibility before you repeat something to make sure what you're repeating is true. And if you can't distinguish between true and false, I suggest you keep your mouth shut, right? Because you can't run a government, a society, without people operating on basic facts. Like, for example, climate change is real. We can debate over whether it's how to address it, but there's no question the climate is changing. It is a fact. It is a mathematical fact. And how do I know this? And somebody will say, well, how do you know? And I said, because science is about repeatable experiments and also proving things wrong. So let's say I said that climate change is real. and this was the first time it had ever been said, which is not true, then 100 people would say, that can't be true. I'll see if he's wrong. And then all of a sudden, they'd see I was right, and I'd get some big prize,
Mm-hmm.
right? So the falsifiability of these assertions is very important.